Howdy, folks. Today we're going to dive deep into lighting mastery and how to build a long lasting career in photography right after this. Welcome to Camera Shake, where we bring you the insider scoop on all things photography and videography, giving you a unique opportunity to stay ahead of the curve. As always, I'm your host, Kirsten Nuts. And before we get started, I've got one thing to ask of you. Over 65% of our viewers on YouTube and listeners on audio are not actually subscribed to this channel, as it turns out. So come on, folks, let's change that. Just hit that subscribe button. It helps me get even cooler guests on the show. It's just one click. That is all it takes. Thank you so much. Now, without further ado, let's welcome today's special guest, photographer, educator, lighting wizard, YouTuber, and all-round commercial powerhouse. Give it up for none other than John Gress. John, man, good to have you on the show.
Thanks for having me.
It's a real pleasure to have you on the show. We met in person for the first time only a few weeks ago at Imaging USA. It was really great to see you there. How was that for you? Was it? Do you like imaging, or how does it compare to other shows for you?
Yeah, it was great meeting you there. I was so glad that we ran into each other. And that's the thing I love about imaging is it's all about, meeting new people and then seeing your old friends from across the country. I think I spoke at Imaging for the first time in 2019 and I was scared to death, but I guess it worked out okay because they kept asking me to come back and speak at different times over the years. And so this time I was teaching a class about using colored gels and LEDs and how overlapping colored light relates to each other and teaching people about color harmony. And it was a really good time. So it's probably my favorite show to go to overall out of all the ones that okay, let me not get myself in trouble by picking my favorite child, but it definitely is a good time. And I'm looking forward to going next year, which I think it will be in Nashville.
Yeah, I'm also looking forward to it. It's the first time for me at Imaging. I had a awesome time. It was great to connect with people. For me, it was also great to connect with people who I've gotten to know through doing this podcast. But of course, mainly due to the fact that I'm on the other side of the Atlantic, it's often difficult to connect in person. So it was actually a great opportunity to meet people in 3D for the first time.
I might look better in 2D, I'm just saying.
It was actually, you know what? This is the thing that really freaked me out, because again, I talk to people on a screen, and often there's really you have no real perception how tall somebody is. I thought when I saw you, it's like, I thought, well, man, John's taller than I thought he was.
And that happens all the time. So I guess I just need to stand next to the models more often in my YouTube videos, and then people would get a sense of it.
Yeah. So you were speaking at Imaging this year. What was you mentioned your talk was about color gels?
Yeah, so it was using colored gels and colored LEDs. And that was sort of a creative vehicle in order to teach color harmony. So what I was doing more so was teaching people that there were two color wheels, but then also teaching people that what happens when you overlap different colors of light, because what happens isn't really what's expected. So for instance, people, if you ask them, what does yellow and blue equal? They're going to say green because that's what they learned back when they were 7 years old or maybe 5 years old. But the actual answer with light, when you blend those two colors together, is they cancel each other out and you end up with white light. So it's very unexpected. So I was just sort of teaching people that when you use complementary colors of light, they cancel each other out. When you use two different colors of light that aren't complementary, the end result is the color in the middle. So for instance, when you blend red and blue together, the outcome is magenta. So that would be very confusing. So red and blue do not equal purple, they equal magenta. Just like blue and green together equals cyan. There are two color wheels. One of them is red, yellow, blue. That's the color wheel for pigment.
Yes.
So I was picking those three primary colors and then expecting them to make light in my head right now, which is not worth going into. But the other color wheel is for light, and that's the RGB color wheel. So,
and that's like you mentioned earlier, this is the way that pigments mix is what we would learn or what most people would have learned in like primary school or something. This is the thing that we would expect, because in everyday life we tend to deal with pigments more often than we would deal with light. And of course, in photography, everything's different.
Yeah, like red and I got it now. I'll get it now. Red and green equals yellow, which is totally not what you would expect. Blue and green equals cyan, and red and blue equals magenta. Things you wouldn't have thought based on what you were taught with those pigment choices. And then also, if you combine cyan and red, the outcome is white light. If you combine yellow and blue, it's white light.
There's a really great video that I saw that you made that basically explains all of that, which actually has taught me a lot because I was watching it only the other day, mainly because a lot of the stuff that I do is very desaturated, I think, generally speaking, um, but I like to get more into color gels, and what you call it, like constant LED lights, which I had a conversation with Jake Hicks the other day, which was super interesting. And Jake's very much, he's known as the color gel aficionado, but he's recently changed to LEDs, constant lighting. And that's to me, that's really interesting because I really have not got a lot of experience with that generally. Um, so there's this, I love learning new things, and
Oh yeah, me too. And it was actually one of his blog posts that also helped inform me on this topic as well. Um, and it kind of started I guess, to switch back to imaging for a second, because the Professional Photographers of America have something called a certified professional photographer. Um, it's something where you take a test to become a certified
oh yeah,
professional photographer. And when I took a practice test for that, and the areas where I didn't do well were in this color theory section. And so then when I started trying to learn, like, oh, I knew there were two different color wheels, RYB and CMY, but RYB and RGB. I didn't know why they existed or what was happening there. I just knew that there were two of them. And so going in to research that so I would get those answers correct when I finally took the test, um, I was looking at one of his blog posts and some other sources, and that all together sort of informed me on this topic and led me on my path to teach this class and then also make that YouTube video that was a recap of that. So the reason why I made the YouTube video is because in order to prepare for my class at imaging, I created slides that showed what happened when you combined two gels that were either red, green, and blue, or cyan, magenta, and yellow. There's 15 potential combinations. And so I showed what happened when you overlap those two lights together to make those slides. And so since that took me about 8 hours
yeah.
just to make that for the class, I was like, okay, I need to now make a video out of this because I'm in it this deep, and I might as well recap all the things that I was teaching in my class in a YouTube video. So that's the video that I came out with this week.
See, that's the part I love because I remember watching this thing like, man, how long must that have taken to put all of that together? Um, and that brings me to actually your YouTube channel. And I came across your YouTube channel actually years ago, definitely years ago. And the one thing that attracted me to it was really the way that you explain things. You have this ability to break things down and explain them in a really kind of rational way that makes sense. And it's easy to understand and comprehend for somebody who doesn't necessarily maybe have a full grasp of a particular subject. And predominantly with lighting, I know from teaching lighting workshops, that a lot of people struggle with understanding how light works and how it functions, even just white light, and how to photograph humans basically with artificial light. That's the thing that attracted me to YouTube, your YouTube channel originally. How did you get into YouTube, and when did you start um, teaching on YouTube?
Yeah, so it actually goes back to imaging. So I got asked to speak at imaging at that first one in 2019. And prior to that, I've been asked a lot of times by people on YouTube if I was going to start teaching workshops. And I was kind of afraid to do it because I didn't know if I'd be good at it or not. And I didn't really want to rip people off. But then when Angela Kirkian, the person in charge of education for imaging, asked me to speak at that first imaging back in 2019, I was like, well, I guess I better start practicing. So then I started teaching workshops in my studio with just 3 people at a time, because when I got in front of 50 people, I didn't want to look like a complete idiot. And so that one decision by her to have me as a speaker sort of changed the trajectory of my life, because I started I started teaching those workshops finally. So I got off my butt, so to speak, and started teaching those. And then, as sort of an aside to that, I was like, well, if I'm going to teach these workshops, I need for people to be able to feel like they're more connected to me as a person, rather than just looking at photos that I've taken on Instagram. So then I started making the YouTube channel. And at first, I definitely didn't want to be on camera. I just wanted to be, the person behind the camera. Um, and it took me a lot to get over it, over myself, so to speak, and get over the idea that, if you screw up a single word, or, you don't have to start over. You just need to correct yourself and keep moving. But teaching people in person actually really helped me also do better at teaching on YouTube, because I sort of had a good grasp after seeing a lot of people face to face. I sort of had a good idea of how people react to certain phrasing, or what things people normally don't know that they need to know. And so that sort of helped me do better at YouTube, because when I started the whole teaching thing, I was like, a lot of things that I thought were common knowledge that maybe learned 15 years ago, I didn't really remember those things as being important. So the more people that I got in front of face to face, the more that I learned what those things were. And then I learned how to phrase it better when teaching people face to face, and speaking at conferences, and then also making YouTube videos. So it's interesting that the whole thing sort of informed itself, I guess. Me
Yeah.
teaching in person, me wanting to teach in person led to me, um, sorry, me speaking at conferences also led to me teaching in person, also led to me making YouTube videos, and then everything just sort of revolves around, and one informs the other.
Yeah, it's a funny, cycle, and there's a number of things in it. I mean, one thing, I have a long history in teaching and in education. I used to Before I got into professional photography, I had a career in music, and as part of that, I ran a music school, for 12 years, or maybe 11 years or something. Um, and, the interesting thing about teaching music is that you end up teaching a lot of beginners. That's just part of It's like a pyramid. The large base of the pyramid is where all the beginners are, and then as you go up to the tip of the pyramid, you have those super advanced players, but they're only going to be very few of them. So you spend most of your time teaching beginners, and as a guitarist, I think many people think, "Oh, it's really boring," because I want to teach people like some, I don't know, complex concepts or something. Um, But what it actually does, what I found it did, was because you have to go so far back into the very basics of, let's say, playing technique, because you have to explain to a beginner, like, this is how you hold a pick, this is how you
Yeah.
move, this is how you move your hand, this is how you hit the string, don't hit it too hard, la la la, don't move too far away from the string, all these sort of things. What that actually does is shines a light on your own technique, and it actually makes you a much better player, because you really have to get really granular with your own technique, because you're constantly demonstrating it to beginner students. And I found that it's actually it was more beneficial to me in my development as a musician at the time than teaching very advanced players. Because the reality is, when you teach a really advanced player, they play, you listen, you make some intelligent comments, and that's pretty much it, because they already know how to play. And so for me, it led to like a complete shift in mindset from when I first got into teaching. I thought, oh, well, I want to teach the very advanced people, because, for some reason I thought it makes me feel, I don't know, more important or something, or whatever. But actually, I realized that it really the thing that helped me grow as a musician was really teaching beginners. And so I find a similar thing is happening with teaching workshops. Sometimes things like positioning a softbox, to get the perfect rampant lighting. You actually have to be a lot more accurate when you're teaching a beginner, because they really need to see the result. And also getting the questions. It's like you mentioned earlier. The questions that beginners ask usually are the questions that most people who are watching your YouTube video are asking themselves. And so having that interaction in a live teaching situation is so super valuable. Um, what was it like for you, like talking to a camera, without actually having a human to talk to initially?
Well, I mean, just feeling like I needed to be perfect all the time. That was the thing that was most difficult. Getting concerned about, you know, little things that might be wrong, like, is my shirt exactly looking right? Or, is one hair out of place? I just had to sort of get used to that, learn to live with imperfections, even though at first everything was about being perfect. And, that just took a while to get more comfortable with, and, sort of say, well, there'll be another video next week. So let's just move on. And and about, as you were saying, teaching beginners, the thing that was interesting for me as I started teaching workshops is the first few times I was going to different studios, because I teach the workshops in different cities, and was always going to a new place. And at first, I would struggle to get things exactly right in a studio that was maybe small with white walls versus a larger studio, which was similar to my own. And so now, none of that is difficult for me just because I've done the same things in so many different spaces. I kind of feel like I'm a lot more precise now than I was at the beginning, because originally I was starting out. Um, and I think for the most part, I would just sort of wing it a little too much. And then I started teaching things. A lot more using a light meter. And that really, the reason why I started doing that is because I wanted to give the students or the attendees something that was finite that they could use to recreate the same looks later. Because if I just sort of said like, "Oh, let's turn the hair light up until it looks good," that
Yeah.
isn't really that's a lot more difficult for you to teach someone a level of taste than to teach someone a scientific number. So, maybe instead of saying turn it up till it looks good, I would say let's put it so that it's two stops down from our main light, and then we'll turn it up or down until it looks good. But knowing that if we have blonde hair, it's going to be really low. And if we have black hair, it's probably going to be really high. So just sort of giving people a baseline or a starting point to go from, that helped out a lot. And then probably instead of me just winging it a little bit and going by my own feeling as to how things looked at first, just having that light meter sort of gave me more of a level of precision. And then also like teaching the same, um, let's say when I do a 1 day workshop, like I just did in Charlotte, maybe instead of um, me reinventing the wheel every time, there's probably like 15 lighting setups that I teach, and I might teach five that day. So most everything is something that I've done before. I'm just bringing it back for that group based on where I feel like they're at with their skills and what I think will look good with the models and the clothes that they brought. So um, it's just really interesting, seeing where things go, and it's also great as well, like going to all these different places and meeting people from different cities and developing friendships with people, and so it's quite rewarding overall.
Hey, let me just jump in real quick to tell you about the amazing sponsor of this episode, Platypod. Platypod offers innovative camera support systems designed to unleash your creativity. With their stable, versatile, and portable solutions, you can capture stunning shots like never before. And I'm not just saying that. As the host of the Camera Shake podcast, I can personally vouch for Platypod's incredible products. They've become an integral part of the show. In fact, I'm surrounded by various Platypod products holding up lights, cameras, microphones, and so on. It's really helped to transform the way I make the show and the way I shoot at home, in the studio, and on location. But don't just take my word for it. Explore Platypod's website at www.platypod.com to discover their range of products, including the Platypod Extreme, Platypod tripod heads, and the brand new handle, of course. Make sure to follow Platypod on Instagram and Facebook at Platypod Tripods for exclusive updates, tips, and giveaways. By choosing Platypod, you're not only investing in your photography, but you're also supporting the Camera Shake Photography Podcast. Thanks again to Platypod, our amazing sponsor. Platypod, where innovation never sleeps. It's an interesting thing because, I always think, what social media has done, YouTube being at the sort of, at the helm of it really, and Instagram to an extent, is that it's, for many people, for many professional photographers, it's have dramatically changed their career compared to before the advent of social media. And a lot of the time, especially the pandemic was for a lot of people was one of these pivot points, where, I mean, certainly for me, and I've spoken about this many times on this podcast, the pandemic for me was the originator or the cause for this podcast in the first place. Um, how does what you do now compare to what you did, let's say, 10 years ago before the advent of social media?
Well, I actually got on Instagram about 10 years ago because I thought that I was going to get exposed to a new audience of people that would potentially hire me. And what I did, because I'm sort of an attention whore, was I just sort of looked and saw what things did well. And those were behind the scenes photos. So if I posted a behind the scenes photo and then a final photo, those got a lot of attention. So I was like, okay, let me post more of that because, more attention will eventually equal more money. So I thought I was going to get more attention and more people following me, and those people would eventually hire me to take photos of them, or take photos for their company. But as it turned out, that's when photographers started following me, and then they started asking me to teach them. And so as it worked out, that did equal a new sort of career path for me, but it wasn't the one that I was expecting. I thought, of course, that I would get on there, I would get more clients that would pay me to take photos. Now I end up meeting more people who are hiring me to or coming to my workshops in order for me to help them get better at their photography so that they can serve their clients better. So for me, I feel like I started off at the beginning of my career, I started off as a photojournalist. Then, as journalism sort of started to wane about 15 years ago, then I transitioned over into being a full-time commercial photographer. And then with the advent of social media, that switched me over to where 2/3 of the time I'm doing education related stuff, and 1/3 of the time I'm servicing those commercial photography clients. So it really has changed my life and the trajectory of my life, and I never saw this coming. And it's really quite rewarding to be able to help all these people on the journey because I didn't have anyone to help me. And back when I started out, um, I think I got my first lights in 1999. Um, I just sort of had to figure it out. Like I had a few mentors, and one of them I thought was pretty good, but he wasn't that good at lighting. He had a very rudimentary understanding now that I look at it in retrospect. Um, and the only advice he gave me was, light goes until it hits something. What else do you need to know? And which sounded pretty sarcastic, but it is very true. But um, and I just sort of had to look at finished photos and imagine how they were created based on my own past experience. Whereas over time, we started to develop blogs, and then you could sort of see behind the scenes photos. The advent of social media, you would see more behind the scenes photos. And now with the advent of YouTube and Reels, like your ability to learn things is like off the charts. just based on all the content is out that's out there. So for me, social media really took me on an entirely new path that I didn't think was going to happen, but it also has allowed me to get inspired by other people's work and then see what they're doing and try that out myself and then learn from that and then share that with others. So it really is quite a wonderful and beautiful thing. So um I'm just glad that we live in the time that we live in and we have all these opportunities to grow our skills and then, of course, help others in the process.
The thing that's, I was thinking about this the other day, actually. The thing about the sort of the impact of social media, and um, just like what you just talked about, it's been very similar for me in the sense that I used to predominantly do commercial work before the pandemic. Then the pandemic happened, and I started this podcast, and here we are, whatever 250 episodes later. Um, the real advantage for me has been the fact that before this podcast, I think photography for me was quite a what's the word? Quite a solitary type of profession. You know, you shoot an event, you're there, I mean, you're surrounded by people, but really you're doing a job, you're shooting, then you shoot in the studio. So maybe there might be maybe one, two people there, it's not really an extremely social sort of profession generally, but because of the effects of, social media, it's really propelled me into meeting, a vast group of people that I never thought I would have an opportunity to meet. And so it has literally the word social in the whole thing has literally become true, because I think without it, I would have never ended up going to trade shows like the photography show here in London or, imaging, or, whatever it may be. It would have most certainly not led to me making, connecting with this whole range of people, making new acquaintances and friends, and actually also it would it would have never enabled me to learn this much from the people that I've met and the people that I've met on the podcast and had the opportunity to talk to, and it's always to me it's always really fun to talk to people whose work I've either admired or who I've learned from a great deal, like your YouTube channel, for instance, being one of them. You know, and that's always a pleasure to sort of bring that background to the social in social media.
Yeah, and I was just at WPPI a few weeks ago, meeting some of the other speakers. I also went to the World Photographic Cup this week, and I met a few photographers from Mexico and Japan and Europe. So it was just interesting, again, to make relationships with new people that I hadn't met before, discover people's work, also now have an opportunity to keep up with them. And so it's really great. And I'm really grateful for all these opportunities to keep traveling, meeting these people, hanging out with them, and just growing those relationships and also growing my skills too by being inspired by those people as well.
So you mentioned you started in photojournalism originally. How did you? What was the thing that drove you to using a camera or to photography originally?
So when I went to summer camp around, let's say, age 14, probably, I borrowed my mom's point and shoot camera. And I found that it was a great opportunity for me to start conversations with people and make friends because when I was going to school, I probably, let's say, was one of the 10 least popular kids. And I didn't know that there was an extrovert living inside of me waiting to come out. And so I love the idea that I could use that camera to start up conversations and make friends with new people. And somewhere along there, I married that with the idea that I also collected sports cards at the time and really enjoyed following sports. And so I thought like, oh, I want to become a sports photographer. So then I started doing that for like the school newspaper and the local community paper, and then that eventually led into a career in journalism, where I worked for a medium-sized daily newspaper. I worked for two of the world's two largest news services or wire services, where I would create content wherever I was for publications around the world. And it's funny that I went from that kid who loved sports to then going to these sports events and not caring about the sports events themselves, just caring about knowing what was happening and capturing the outcome of the game and getting the right pictures to match the story that day. To now, actually, I get to photograph. I've come full circle. I get to photograph professional athletes sometimes for their trading cards, and when I do that, I have no idea who these people are, and that if I were, the 13-year-old in me who started in photography would have would freak out at the opportunity that I have today to meet and work with these people. I would also probably be very ashamed of me for the fact that I have no idea who these athletes are usually when I meet them. Um, but that actually seems like it's to my advantage sometimes because, I'll just start talking to them like, "Oh, so where did you go to college?" And they expect that every person that they've ever, met knows everything about their bio, and it just shows that I have no idea, and then I feel like it sort of brings down the barrier, and we just sort of talk as people, so it's
I
rather
mean,
interesting.
one of the most important things is, connecting with your subject and just being able to, strike up a conversation and, and that way everybody's nerves it just lowers everybody's nerves, and everybody's like on a level. Um, I was shooting a model yesterday and I was talking to her about exactly that because, um, it's so important to kind of build that connection, pretty much, well, as soon as possible, really, before, you know, before things, because that's often is the thing. Like when you're, I think for me, when you're in a shoot and you just don't connect with the person that you're shooting, that's when things just get really frustrating for me anyway. And I just don't feel like I can get the results that I'm looking for, um, if I can't make that connection. So that's really something I've had to learn for sure.
Absolutely.
So, um, so when you started in photojournalism, what was that? How did you make that transition to commercial photography?
Yeah. So, right out of the gate, probably there would be opportunities where you would get asked, uh, there would be a public relations company that needed a photographer to take these journalistic style photos in order to release them to the press so that they could get publicity about whatever thing that they were doing. So I would get referrals for that type of job and I would start doing those. And then eventually I would meet, let's say that I would get hired to go photograph the CEO of a big company, and then I would meet someone while doing that, and then that worked in the marketing or communications department for that company, and then maybe they would hire me later to shoot their advertising or their corporate headshots and that sort of thing. So it was just sort of getting those introductions, and then those converting into commercial photography. So the same thing that was happening with that also happened when I started um, uh, photographing models from a website called Model Mayhem. Um, that I started working with stylists, both for fashion and for hair. And then eventually those would lead to some referrals too for some other work. So on one of those shoots, I met a hairdresser who happened to be the art director for a beauty education company. And then that led to me working with him in order to create this beauty education curriculum. And then that type of photography in the beauty industry started being probably, I don't know, maybe half of my income, let's say, before I started teaching other photographers. So you never know like where all these connections are going to, you know, where they're going to get you eventually. But we're always just meeting people and learning and growing. And, I kind of joke sometimes that I'm on my third career as a photographer, having started off in photojournalism, then going over to commercial, and now into education. So, hopefully, this is it because I really love doing it. I really love everything that I get to do right now. But who knows where the universe may take me in the future.
But that brings us back to the introduction to this episode, actually, how to build a long-lasting career in photography. And it's, I think things are different now compared to what they were like maybe 50 years ago, where you could literally do the same thing for your entire career. Um, and it feels to me like there is a need today in today's world to be able to, pivot and shift and change, because otherwise there are things around you that change so quickly, technology being one of them, for example, um, that will potentially prevent you from being able to continue with that same career, and it might actually just throw you out of business unless you're willing to change. I'm thinking about, like, shifts in terms of, the advent of the internet, the shift from film to digital. Now we have AI that's, freaking everybody out because clearly it's going to kill all of us photographers and take all of our jobs, you know.
I'll just
So,
become a history YouTuber.
well, that's it. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the days before artificial intelligence. Do you remember the real world? Yeah.
Oh no, that's not. It's not exactly what I meant, but yeah.
Well, I mean, but that's the thing. I by the way, just in brackets here, I love history YouTube channels. Just saying it now. At history podcasts, yeah, big fan. Um, but yeah, it's this ability to change, and to reinvent yourself in a sense. That's sort of, to me, is nowadays it's sort of the foundation of a long lasting career, and of course the ability to build on your skill sets. Because I don't know what it was for you. Certainly for me, actually, I'm going to ask you what it was like for you. Um, that with the advent of social media, you said earlier you were sort of researching, what would work and what wouldn't work on social media. Did that dramatically change the way you shot?
So, uh, I think it probably did, but you actually made me think of a few things, which is that the the biggest thread in developing my career over time has been building real relationships with people. There was a time where I got asked to photograph. Every month, I would shoot a video of the Legal Marketing Association's luncheon, and they would have a speaker come. And one of those speakers that they had was saying that the best thing you can do to market your attorneys is to have them involved in some sort of social business groups, and even more so, have them lead those social business groups, because then they'll connect with other like minded attorneys who will probably refer them work. And if they become a leader of those organizations, then they'll start being seen more as a figure of authority, and that will lead to more business development. So, for in the attorney context, a patent attorney is not supposed to make someone's will or defend them in criminal court. But if they all belong to the same biker gang, then when they have someone come along that says, "Hey, I need a will," and they're a patent attorney, they can refer them to that estate attorney and that sort of thing. So that was the idea that they were putting forward, and it really resonated with me because um, I think the thing that developed my career and kept me going through all these phases was those legitimate relationships that I started to build with people, at first not really realizing that that's what was happening, but that just sort of kept me going throughout my career and leading to whatever the next thing was. So if I had things to do over again, I would on focus more deliberately on building those relationships. I think at first, in the first 15 to so year, trying to think of how long I've actually been doing this now. Okay, so I think I'm approaching nearly 30 years. So let's say that in the first 15 to 20 years that I was passively developing those relationships. I would just sort of not even think about it. And I also was avoiding building some of those relationships sometimes because I was thinking like, well, let me not go out to drinks with this client because I'm gonna say something stupid and put my foot in my mouth as I'm prone to do. Let me just hang back. And that probably led to less business development over time because even if I made those foot in my mouth mistakes, I'm sure people would have forgiven me. But but in the end, it would have equaled, more prosperity over time. So I should have taken those risks. And then the other thing is, having those personal connections with people, it's causes them to be more sticky, if you will, towards you as the person that they hire to do that work for them. So that's the other thing. So not only building the relationships in order to keep up the repeat business, but also building the relationships to keep up the referrals, but also having the benefit of making genuine relationships with real people, which is, probably what life is all about. The other thing is that I feel like I always tried to grow my skills and do something different in order to keep learning. So when I got those first lights in 1999, a lot of the other photojournalists, they were doing more basic portrait lighting, and I started to experiment and try out different things and try to learn things. And it's because I wanted to take on that technology and learn that thing. And so that then increasing or improving my lighting skills set me up for success when photojournalism and still photography started to decline because right there around 2008 to 2012 is when a lot of the clients that I had started pulling back their spending and pulling back or maybe even going out of business in some contexts, especially for magazines. And so I needed something else to do. But thankfully, I developed those technical skills in lighting that set me up for success as a commercial photographer. And so that then led to the next series in my life. And then time frame phase of my life career. Um, and then, of course, having those skills and continuing to grow my skills set me up to be a photography educator. So I had no idea that when I started out, you know, photographing sports events, that I would end up getting really good at lighting and then hopefully getting good at teaching people. So it really is sort of that whole progression. Um, and then specifically, being exposed to Instagram all the time in particular, I think really has changed. It's definitely changed the way that I shoot because I'm seeing things that I like and I'm slowly evolving my style into something new and, taking on a new thing. So, probably around 2015 to 2018, that's when I started seeing a lot of painterly looking window lit portraits with painted backgrounds. And I started, into that. And and then probably at one time there was a lot of high contrast black and white things that I was doing. So I started going down that avenue. Now recently, with the advent of LEDs and the ability to change colors and have all sorts of things going on really quickly in our shots, now there's a whole other avenue of learning. So I think over time, I've just tried to grow those relationships with people, grow my skill level, and then also, just wait and see where the universe takes me. But definitely having those two things, the relationships and growing your skills, those things will, come together in order to get you the right work at the right time. Because, you might, um, if I didn't have the ability to do those beauty shots when I met the art director for the beauty education company, then I wouldn't have went down that avenue. So it's sort of like, we have to marry the idea of growing our skills and growing our relationships in really order to move forward and be prosperous, I think, as photographers.
Now, growing your skills, to me, that's it's really at the core, for me personally, of what I do. And this is just really just for me, it's just driven by natural curiosity, I think. And it's, for me, that, Instagram had a major impact on that because you're all of a sudden you're exposed to so many different accounts and images, and and I always used to think like, wow, like how how did that person do that? That's unbelievable. And then immediately I'd be like, right, let's reverse engineer that. Like, how can you get that look? And then the next step for me has always been trial and error. I'm lucky I have a little shooting space in my house, a mini studio, which is actually exactly, what you mentioned earlier. It's a small space with white walls, and you get used to shooting in that. And of course, for me, it's probably the exact opposite to yourself. When I'm in a big studio and I don't have my little white walls next to me, I feel like, oh, things are different. I mean, by now I've gotten used to it, but in the beginning it was like, why doesn't light behave the way I'm
Yeah.
expecting it to? It's like, oh, because you get no reflections from anywhere. Ah,
Hmm.
one of these things. That's why I like V flats, especially the white side. I just built my own. This is actually, I tell you what, it's a funny thing. So I did talk at a photography show, and I was on a live shooting stage. So it's basically where you demonstrate live shoots. And I was recreating a sort of a portrait thing that I do a lot. And in setting up the set on stage for me, I had to measure the exact difference between the backdrop and the back of the models. It was a seated pose, basically, because I needed to know exactly where the back of the model would be in order for me to position my backlights accurately to get the same type of hotspot that I'm used to at home, given my equipment. And so to me, it was important to measure that distance accurately. And I remember I was setting up, and the person I'm setting up with, he goes like, "I can't believe you're measuring that. Why are you measuring?" I was like, because this is a different space. I need to recreate the conditions that I have at home, and having the distances accurate helps me to not fumble around, like you said earlier. But when I'm in front of the audience, I need to get the result that I'm expecting, because that's what we're here to learn, basically. Um, so to me, test shooting, as I call it, or practice shooting, is super important. I know you do that a lot. You practice a lot.
Yeah. So when I started off with lighting at first, I was photographing business people and people in the news. And this in the news, in case that sounded like in the nude. Um, and my skill level went up really quickly, and then it sort of leveled off because I wasn't practicing. And then when I got on Instagram, I ran out of content to post, and then I started having to practice again. So then I would find models on Instagram, and I would do a few shoots a month, and I would try out those new things that I was inspired by, and then that would increase my skills. And then eventually, I needed to start making content for my membership website, the Academy with John Gress, or I needed to make things for YouTube. And then I needed, to do practice shoots, sort of, but they were a little more directed in that it's like, okay, I need to make a video to show how to recreate window lighting. So that's what we're going to do today in this shoot. And maybe I would find some images that I thought were inspiring, and then I would go and I would try out those particular images. So that's actually going to be my next YouTube video in a few weeks. Which is how to recreate window lighting in 3 different scenarios. And I think in one of them, I actually talk about how I had an inspiration image from a particular photographer. They were gracious enough to share their photo with me so that I could show it on screen to sort of explain where I was coming from with the art direction and that sort of thing. Um, and then let me step back one bit, just because I think I made a veiled comment that I didn't explain very well. But yes, if the AI takes us out as photographers, I think I will use the skills that I've developed, um, particular in making videos, to make history related content on YouTube, uh, in order to, educate people about history, just because I find that to be really fascinating. And that's the thing that I watch almost every night when falling asleep. Sometimes I watch the same show 3 times. So it's and I just find it interesting because I'm just constantly learning something and learning something new. Whereas when I was younger, I was like, I don't need to know this stuff and all of these dates. But now it's really like about learning the context of everything. That's what I think is so great about history, is that um we're we're learning how this social movement leads into this social movement, goes into that social movement, and how things progress. Just like in my career, going from photojournalism to commercial photography to being a photography educator, maybe that will then take me into educating people about something else. So if the AI takes us out. So that's what I guess is sort of maybe the theme, is just developing your skills over time and be open to whatever comes your way.
And video as well. I mean, this is another thing, you mentioned obviously, and of course it goes, I don't know what the expression is. Is it hand in parcel or something? Hand in glove, whatever the
Hand
thing
in
is.
glove, yeah.
Yeah. With creating educational content, because this is the other thing, of course, is that even as a photographer, once you start imparting your knowledge to other people, you need to find not only a platform, but you also have to create that content somehow. And then you're in the realm of video and filming, and then it's audio because obviously, and so it pushes you to improve your skill set. And I mean, I have to say, although technically, for instance, my business is predominantly built around stills photography, I do get a lot of requests for video these days. That has definitely increased massively since the pandemic. I would probably go as far to say before the pandemic, if it was maybe 5%, it is certainly now. I mean, a lot of the stuff I do is video. It's
That's great.
at least
Yeah.
50%. So just and had I not had those skills beforehand, that yeah, I would have probably found it hard to pivot on that. But it just goes to show, improving your and increasing your skill set can only be beneficial in the long run. Because it's like you said, we don't know what's around the corner, in whatever happens next.
Yeah, I think from 2013 to 2020, my video became like 25% of what I did, and, that dropped off in the last 5 years, but I think part of that too is, like, everything I put into the universe was photography education, so everything I got back was photography education related. So that's the other thing we should think about too, is, like, whatever we put out there all the time that we're doing is probably what people are going to see and then hire us to do, more of in the future. So, you know, that's the other thing, probably just, like, getting used to documenting and sharing what you're doing online will lead to, your future business. So,
Yeah. Would you say it's a better idea? And this is a question I ask a lot, because I haven't made up my mind about this. Would you say it's a better idea to specialize in something, or to cast a wider net and um, create a variety of different um, output?
so going back to the monthly meeting with the attorney marketing people, they were saying, don't market an attorney as a generalist, market them as a specialist, because it's far easier to do that, and brand them as something rather than just having them be the jack of all trades generalist photographer. So, you know, eventually we're all probably going to find something that we're best at in photography. Don't stress out about it if you're just starting down that road and you're interested in three different things and you're not really sure what the one thing is that you're most interested in. But eventually, I think things will sort themselves out and you'll start to get better at that one thing. People will start to recognize it. They'll start to hire you for that thing, and that will all eventually lead to you, probably specializing in something, even if that isn't your intent. But if you look at someone's, like, let's say you are the purchaser of photography and you go to someone's website and they have pictures of airplanes and wildlife and family portraits, and they're all trying to be displayed at the same time, you're going to dilute the message that you're sending to the viewer, because someone's either coming there because they want a picture of, I think I said airplanes, or they want a picture of a tiger, or they want you to take a picture of their family. And so it's probably much better for you just to showcase that one thing that you're really trying to do. And part of that decision might be based on, what is the thing that's making you the most money. I had to make a decision at one point when I was editing my portfolio because I was trying to showcase a lot of those photojournalism images in a few galleries because um, that was still part of my personal internal identity as who I was as a photographer. But I had to, just break it down to myself one day and be like, no one is going to hire you in order to take some picture of someone crying at the scene of a disaster. Yes, it's a powerful emotional image, but that's never going to lead to you making any income. And it's just distracting from the thing that you're trying to do otherwise. So, um, put forward the things that people hire you to do, um, and think of it that way. I heard in a friend's podcast the other day, she said, was talking about editing your studio environment for when your clients come. And she said, like, don't put every award you've ever got for everything ever on the wall because no one cares if you got third place in the photography spelling bee in 1994. Like, get that out of here. Like, just go with the things that are impressive. And it's kind of the same thing for our work. If you're trying to target people for business headshots, put that forward. Make it easy for people to book business headshots and see your work with regard to that. Don't clutter it with a bunch of photos of eclipses and things that have nothing to do with what you want people to hire you for.
And that's obviously ultimately that's at the core of everything is like how to monetize, your photography. That's always I think is the most difficult part for everybody, especially when it's starting out. It's like how do you get somebody to part with actual cash money for the thing that I want to do? Um, so when you went into portraiture, basically into portrait photography, um, what were the first steps? So did you advertise yourself? Or how did you make your studio run?
So I think one of the first things I did was I started to identify who a competitor was and try to set up my pricing uh to beat them on price slightly. I don't think this actually worked and led to any more business. It probably hurt me in the long run because then I ended up making less money overall. So I would probably, if I had that to do over again, would probably look to be, you know, in the middle of the road. Definitely don't try to be the cheapest option because then people are just going to try to beat each other on price all the time. And and that's not really going to work out well. The other thing too is you probably don't want to attract the customer who wants the cheapest photographer possible because then they're going to push you all the time to get a discount, or they're not necessarily going to they're not going to be susceptible to an upsell. So so that's something to think about too. I did market myself a little bit. I did some Facebook ads back when I was shooting weddings. Now, a little more than 15 years ago, a little more than 10 years ago. Um, but I'm not really certain that they really worked. I think mostly what worked for me was doing SEO. I did run some Google ads for portrait photography a few years ago. I don't think I had enough Google ads at the time in order for those fish that I got on the line to actually look at my page and feel comfortable hiring me. So I think one of the steps would be so sorry. So what I took from that was actually I saw all the data of what people were searching for when they saw my ad that was available in the Google Analytics for those ads. And so I started targeting all of those phrases with SEO. So I would take shoots that I did before and I would write a blog post to target those search terms in order to try to get that traffic organically. Sure, I won't be in the top 3 on that page, but I would assume, hopefully, if somebody is searching for that phrase, they might skip over those sponsored ads at the top of the page and go down to the non-sponsored things and start looking at those photographers. Um, so that's definitely something that I've done. Um, And I think mostly what I've done is either building those relationships and getting those referrals, or trying to get business through SEO, and then that also leads to relationships and referrals and more business. So I think if I had a better strategy originally to get Google and Yelp reviews at the time, um, that I probably would have gotten more business over time. So what I do now is I use 17 Hats, which is a CRM, and you can set up a workflow, which is sort of like a digital checklist with automations for every job or every type of job that you do. So I have one uh, that's specific to, I have a workflow that's specific to fulfillment. And so in that workflow, the very last step is automatically someone gets a survey that asks them to rate the service. And then if they answer that the service is an 8 or higher, they get a link to a Google, where to leave a Google review. If they answer 7 or below, they get asked to tell us what was wrong. But just doing those little steps to get people to review your business will probably lead to, um, having those leads that you get from SEO or paid placement in Google ads actually converting over to be a customer. So if you don't have a lot of reviews now, I probably would be asking everyone that I've come in contact with in the course of doing my work to leave me a review, including like those friends who you did a favor for, and say, okay, it's time to pay me back with the Google review or something like that.
Why are Google reviews so important?
Well, I think for the most part, if you're not getting business from a referral, you're getting it through a Google search, and that's going to come up there, right. You know, your Google reviews are going to come up almost instantaneously in those searches, especially if they're searching for your name in particular. And people being able to see that, yes, you're like a legitimate business and people like your service is going to go a long way in converting those customers or converting those leads into customers.
It's so yeah, because I'm not really a computery type of person. I don't really understand how it works. Is it like so that the more Google reviews you have, or the more positive Google reviews you have, the higher you rank in the search results? Is that how it works?
Um, so, like, let's say that, someone searched London headshot photographer, and they came across your page and they like your work, but they're like, okay, I think I could book him. Um, let's see what people are saying. So then they're going to Google your name, and then instantly your Google business page is going to pop up there, probably on the side, and they'll be able to see how many reviews you have and then make a judgment as to whether or not you might be the photographer for them. So that's one of the ways it might work out. It might also work out that they're searching for headshot photographers near me. And then you're showing up as a business that's registered with Google in that geographic location where they're located. And then they're probably going to see the reviews that way. Or you might have like a slider embedded on your website somewhere where it's showing the Google reviews. For me, I've written a number of blog posts where I include the Google reviews in the blog posts to add more characters to the page, which helps you get ranked higher on Google because the longer the post is, the more it uses the keywords that relate to the thing you're talking about, the better off you'll be. But let's say I did get someone to read that SEO blog post that's about headshot photography. Well, there is a section that says what our customers are saying about us, and there's 3 real reviews that are linked back to Google. Like that lends a lot more credibility to you as well, knowing that these are real reviews from real people that are verifiable that you can click on and read right there on Google. So I think it's a lot of different ways, but that it can help you. But specifically, I think if you're advertising on Google, then I think when you advertise on Google, it does show those reviews in the results.
The one thing I've learned over time is that unless I specifically ask people to leave Google reviews, they virtually never do. I would very, very rarely do. So I have it as part of when I deliver images. Um, because I don't use I try. Well, let's put it this way: I try to avoid online galleries, mainly because for me it slows down the process and the delivery workflow too much. I like to know which images are going to be touching by the time the client leaves, my studio. And so I just have this little procedure that basically helps me to cut out this whole like setting up an online gallery and then waiting for people to pick their shots and like because I can't, my brain doesn't work like that. Like I need to get this job out the door, and I need to sort of refocus on the next job I have to shoot. So I loathe online galleries, but basically what that means is, by the time the client leaves, I know which shots I'm going to retouch. I can deliver them relatively quickly. And what I found is if I make a specific request, including a link to Google reviews, people are much more likely to leave a positive Google review because first of all, not that much time has passed between the actual shoot and the experience, and then they actually taking the opportunity to write the post. And I always find that leads to, for me personally, I find it leads to better results than setting up online galleries, and it takes like a week and a half until they've picked their shots, and it takes another few days, and so by the time they actually receive their images, it's like 3 weeks down the line, and I just can't work like that. Possibly.
So some of my friends swear by doing that in-person review like that leads to more sales. So probably is a very good thing. Um,
Absolutely.
I Yeah, so I speed up my fulfillment process by working. So the person who I was working with as a retoucher now works for me the equivalent of 1 hour a day. And one of the tasks that he does is take a Lightroom mobile gallery and turn it into an online gallery so that I can. He prepares the images for me by fixing cropping mistakes or exposure mistakes, and then gets rid of the blinks and those, bad photos. And then he uploads those for me, for the client to review. So, but yeah, I do try to turn this around and I do try to turn it around within 48 hours so that they aren't waiting a long time. But I guess if I had the patience to sit through a culling process with a client, then I probably would do better. Originally, I was selling things by the look, and then I started with online scheduling. I realized that I was really selling time. So then I started just saying, whatever you want during this block of time, here's what we can probably get done during that period of time. Um, and so that's the way that I sell it now. So I have for models and actors, I have 1 hour, 2 hour, 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, and 5 hours. And so most everyone lands in that 2 to 3 hour range. And those include 3 and 5 retouched images, respectively. And most people, I had the numbers exactly, but I want to say just off the top of my head now that about half of the people do upgrade to something, whether that's just adding one image, but it's often adding all of the images not retouched in higher medium resolution, or they're adding a package of 5 images for the cost of 4, something like that. So another photographer told me that he shares with the client at every stage of communication upgrade options, which he says primes them in order to spend more money. So on the booking page, provided that you are on a web page, not on the mobile device, you'll see the upgrade options there right below the packages. When you get a confirmation, oh, sorry, the upgrade options are actually on the next screen that you go to. When you actually go to book your appointment, you can tick them off. Um, you can then, you also get those upgrade options when you get the confirmation email. You get them when you get the gallery email. You get them when you get the gallery reminder email if you haven't picked yet. Um, So at every option, there is an opportunity for them to there's an upsell opportunity. So including now I'm using Shootproof to deliver my online galleries, and in Shootproof I have a you know, you can put in the cart for free the total number of images that come with your session, but if you want anything else, those options are over there on the side of the page for them to choose from. So um, it seems to be working out okay, but probably I would do better if I were doing those in-person proofing sessions like yourself. But
It's
I'll get there someday.
and I think it always depends, I mean, I wouldn't say I'm overrun with headshot sessions, so, I do have the time to do that. It'd be difficult if the demand was at a point where, I would really have to knuckle down on the time. It's then, that I think possibly, a different model would potentially work better. But it really just depends on, I think, where you are, what exactly is that you do, how busy you are, at what point in your, career you're at. Because again, it's like I said, I like to switch things around, and I might very well try different things. In fact, very recently, I've been thinking about changing my pricing structure a little bit, just to calibrate it a little bit. Um, and so, who knows? I'd like to experiment a little bit because you never know. You know, something might be more successful. If it isn't, then it's easy to switch back. You know,
Oh, absolutely.
what's your future plan for the next year or two? I know you're looking forward to speaking at Imaging in Nashville, I believe it is, next year. What have you
Yeah.
got planned between now and then?
They haven't announced the speakers yet. Hopefully, that will be me. I'll also have to find out some more information about the photography show and check that out in London. But I'll be teaching a workshop once a month in either at my studio in Chicago or in different cities around the U.S. Um, I've also got like a few trips planned here and there, going to a wedding, those sorts of things. But um, I'm not sure that I've really set a specific goal for myself for the year, but I probably should be doing that. Something that I want to learn or develop. The year is still young.
Absolutely, absolutely. Well, it's always fun for me to watch your YouTube videos. For those of you listening and watching on YouTube,
Thank
by
you.
the way, you'll find all of the links to John's website and the YouTube channel and everything else in the description below. So it's in the description of the YouTube video, and of course, in the description of all the audio um, the platforms, whatever you call it these days, out there. John, it's been an absolute pleasure
Thank
having you on
you.
the show. Thank you so much. I'm pretty sure it won't be the last time. It's always fun to talk to you. Thank you so much for being this week's guest on the Camera Shake podcast.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, that's a wrap for today's episode. It was awesome having John on the show. But before we go, let me just recommend another episode that I think you like. Check out episode 187 with Russell Preston Brown. I'm sure you love it. If you enjoy the content, consider supporting us on buymeacoffee.com/camerashake to help us keep bringing you amazing episodes in the future. And that really does mean the world to me. And for those of you listening on audio, did you know that there's a video version over on YouTube? Well, you should by now because I keep mentioning it all the time. You'll get to see our guest's stunning photography in full Technicolor over there. Just head over to YouTube, search for Camera Shake Podcast, and you can watch all of our past episodes there too. And if you're already there, be sure to drop us a comment, hit the like button, ring the bell, and share with your friends. Your engagement helps us reach even more people across the globe. Thanks again for listening and watching. And remember, a new episode drops every Thursday. So make sure you mark that in your calendars, diaries, whatever your kids use these days. Until next time, keep shaking things up in the world of photography. See you next Thursday.